You have to go to the global financial market because you want to run your own development the way you know how. You end up with 10%, 12%, 15%, and it becomes impossible. It becomes impossible to finance any meaningful development. Meaning that from the beginning, from where I sit, from the beginning, the current international financial architecture is, to put it bluntly, rigged against those of us in the global south. Because we cannot meaningfully address our development needs.
Yeah.
You
Well, thank you very much for your patience. We had to wait, of course, to have the icing in the cake. And we're going to have now a very informal and frank discussion with His Excellency President Ruto. He told me to call him William, but I cannot do that. We are formally here, so I have to call him Mr. President. And this is going to be a frank discussion. I must start by saying I'm a little bit disappointed because my wife, when she heard that I'm having conversation with you,
international financial architecture is, to put it bluntly, rigged against those of us in the global south, because we cannot meaningfully address our development needs using the financial resources from this architecture.
The message from our panelists, eminent economists and wonderful people here, is very clear. This cannot work. The rich borrow very cheaply. The poor pay incredibly. I describe it as, you know, mafia kind of rate of interest, and it's ridiculous how you do that. And the rating agencies actually who put us all as sub-investment grade and say, oh, because those guys are risky and fall, blah, blah, blah. They're actually engineering our failure. And just to say, oh, I told you, you know, those guys are risky. Something has to be done there to be sorted out. People were complaining also about the speed of action. Where is Greece or Ukraine? Money materialized somehow very quickly. Sri Lanka, Zambia, I mean, they have been in trouble for a long time. What's happening? Even this SDRs who made a big fuss about it, and it's very little actually, it's not a big deal. Still stuck in the system, what to do, so this whole thing, and we agree with you, and we see the debates we had here, they reinforce your message. Besides the financial system, you are holding, I was surprised actually, holding a climate summit here. You said it, climate summit here in a few months' time, just a couple of before. Let's be frank, you don't trust in COP. Why are you having this? Just because we tell Amina, look, Amina, you guys, where is Amina? Because save, you know, if the COP, there's thousands of people go, and then what happens? Then we find the Africans now will have their own summit, and tell us your story. Why you want to have this summit? I don't want to put words in your mouth, please, so you don't get in trouble in car.
More, before I answer to the Climate Action Summit, which is going to be between the 4th and the 6th of September. Okay. I wouldn't go as far as you said, mafia. I wouldn't go that far.
Not. Yeah, you shouldn't. You're a president. I'm not.
But I would say the following. I would say it is our responsibility. They say it is the wearer who knows where the shoe pinches. So it is our responsibility to engineer the debate that will put on the table our perspective, our point of view on what kind of financial architecture, global financial architecture that would work not just for us, but for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it is true that you cannot continue to have the kind of inequalities that are there in the world, because that is why you have all this migration left, right, and center, and you can never have peace until everybody has peace. Yeah. Therefore, unless and until we have a financial system that works for everybody, that financial system, therefore, does not work for nobody. Right? So it is the debate we must have, it's the conversation we must have, and we're not asking for an unreasonable conversation. As I said here yesterday, we are asking for an even win-win architecture that brings on board everybody and does not price others using risk. Or you know Africa is risky, or you know this is risky, or you know. In fact, we can authoritatively say Africa has the highest return of an investment. I don't know how that becomes risky. Let me come back to your
climate.
to climate.
Why you have the this climate?
We have, as a continent, as people from the global south, we have attended COP 26, 27, and the conversation has been a good conversation. We are focused on adaptation. We are focused on loss and damage and that conversation. From where I sit, that conversation is structured from somewhere. It is not a conversation that we have generated from our end. We also have ideas on how we can fix this global problem. And why we are having the Africa Climate Action Summit in Kenya is because first I'm the chair of the Africa's heads of state on climate change.
Okay.
And therefore it gives me responsibility to work on Africa's position when we go to have a conversation with the rest of the globe. That's number one. But much more importantly, yes, it's good for us to have a conversation about loss and damage. Yes, it's good for us to have a conversation about adaptation. But we need to have the more important conversation about climate investment. How do we... The real conversation is how to get to net zero.
Yeah.
That is the real conversation. Yeah. And investments on how to get to net zero, how to re-engineer the globe towards that direction. Investments that are being discussed is in the region of 150 trillion US dollars. The only conversation that is being discussed about loss and damage is 100 billion. It is not a tenth. It is not 1%. So we are being consigned to a debate at the corner about loss and damage adaptation, when the real conversation about investment is happening elsewhere. Why we are meeting in Nairobi on the 4th to the 6th of August is because we believe that it is no longer possible to continue to assume that Africa cannot develop and at the same time have resilient, climate resilient growth. Because for a long time, people thought maybe it is not possible for us to have a conversation about development in Africa and at the same time to have a conversation about climate resilient development. But science has proved, using technology, it is actually possible today. Because of technology, we can actually have a candid conversation on how to leverage on the huge resources we have in renewable energy. There were people who thought that it is not possible to decarbonize our manufacturing or to green our industrialization using green energy because it was expensive to have panels. It was expensive to have wind technology that could actually harness the huge resources we have in our continent to drive our development. But today, science and technology has proven that it is possible to unlock the huge potential of green energy in our continent, yes, not only to drive the greening of our manufacturing and industrialization in this continent, but in fact, the globe needs the resources we have in this continent. If at all, we have to make serious steps in ensuring that we save the world from fossil fuels.
Yeah, but you see, wonderful.
Do you understand why we are going to have this conversation on the more? Yes, it is very important because we want the world to understand that we do not want to come to the table as victims. That's not what we want to do. We want to come, we have our own ideas. We believe we can make a contribution towards sorting out This global challenge is affecting us the most. We have contributed the least, but that is not the conversation. We are telling the globe that we have ideas on how to sort out this problem. And we want Africa to be part of the answer. We are not going to accept to continue to be labeled as victims.
Good. But here is let me just be a devil advocate. We have been talking about loss and damage, and those guys pretended they don't hear us. They don't want to accept any liability. And to my understanding, I think it's only Denmark which accepted. I mean, I am correct to say only Denmark accepted, and it was like a couple of millions, you know, just some small, you know. Those guys refused to accept. Here is another proposal. Okay, you guys keep fighting the loss and damage. I don't believe those people will accept that discussion because they don't want to accept it. Here is another suggestion. Just look at what's happening now. On average, every American, man, woman, and child puts out 16 tons of carbon every year. Europe does 6.5. China does 6 to 7 tons per person every year. Here, we're putting nothing, very little. Some of us put half ton, some put 1 ton. South Africa is the only country in Africa which put something out, which is like 6 or 7, like Europe, because it's using a lot of coal. But that's an outlier situation. 53 countries were not putting anything. How about this argument? The world today puts out 37 trillion tons every year. And scientists say, no. You should be maximum at something 24 if you want to move towards net zero. If we accept that number, we are 8 billion people on the planet. And if we are all equal, and there's a question here, if our friends accept that we are all equal, but let's assume we are all equal, then every man, woman, child in the world is entitled to 3 tons. How about this assumption? We say, okay, 3 tons is the limit. You guys put out in Europe 6 or 7 tons per head. You need to pay into that trust the excess, 3.5 tons per person, multiplied by 450 million, multiply the price per ton, you put this money here. The polluters have to put that money there by international agreement. That is the cost of you. You use something, you pay for it. And everybody understands that. You pay for what you use. Then a country which only emits 1 ton or 2 tons, we say, okay, wonderful. We owe you 1 ton per person. Here's the amount of money. We give you that money. And if we do something like that, enable us to deal with a number of issues, like the Amazon, like the Congo Basin. Everybody tell us, guys, don't touch this, we need it. You need it, pay for it. Yeah, because the whole world pay for that. So we need to create that legal trust where money will be given to the guys who are not putting the carbon out and taken from the guys. That creates a market incentive. My point of view is that those guys taught us about the market. And they told us the market, the power of the market, etc. Even our Chinese friend, and we have a dear friend from China today, told us China may be a communist country, but it believes in the market. Correct? He said that. Okay, this is the market. Let the market force play out. The polluters pay because they are polluting right now. And now they have the incentive to stop polluting because they're paying a lot of money. And the developing countries, which are not putting anything, have good incentive to keep receiving money and to stay as good guys and go green. Why aren't we deploying the market forces and producing some kind of a global system where the polluters pay for what you use. And the guys who are going green receive compensation for that. If we look at that, the countries which are actually affected by climate change are all poor countries. And they are all non-polluters. Then they're going to receive a lot of money. Guys, go and build your resilience and go green, etc. That is a very simple thing. And then people don't treat payments as charity. I think the problem is the polluters. When they say, oh, give you $100 billion, in their mind, it's a charity. You know, okay, I'm going to help you guys, you know, you are victims. But, you know, this year we have crisis here, we have COVID, we have that. I cannot do it. But if it becomes a legal agreement, it's not a charity. You pay for what you use. Would that be something we Africans should advocate? We say, guys, just pay for what you're doing. Instead of thinking that you're giving us charity. It's not a charity. Anyway, something to think about. But what is important, I think, is to try in your summit to develop a coherent African voice. We need one coherent African voice. 1, 2, 3, 4. And instead of going with 54 very weak voices. That's how to amplify, and I really look forward for that. Thank you. So that was about climate, and we talked about the rigged financial system. Then actually, the global order, or maybe you call it now global disorder, things are different now. And polarization, you know, the things are changing around us. How Kenya is gonna navigate now when you have all these competing powers and a lot of antagonizing going on between these powers. I imagine you are pulled this way and you are pulled that way and you pressured here, pressured. How are you going to navigate that to maintain the best path for Kenya?
Well, I think you made a very powerful point. I don't know why you don't want me to respond to it. Because
no, you're free to respond to anything. Did I stop him responding? You have
because you have made a very powerful point about emitters and what do we do about this whole space where we're having a conversation and it's not quite coming out and it's looking like, as you put it, it's charity. We're trying to help those guys. They are victims. You know, they are affected. That kind of conversation. And I really wish what you're saying would happen because Kenya would be among the countries we